and 10 million. Corruption won't pay in the long run. Thinking about those people you'll save is having human dignity. Thinking about our country is being patriotic. Boss, think about it. Do you really want to let this golden opportunity pass? This is about your values. Do the Ungwana thing and lose 10 million. Boss, that will be stupid. Rise up to your true human spirit. Do the right thing.
Just think about it. Isn't engaging in acts of corruption ushenzi? Fighting corruption, my responsibility. Fighting corruption is Ungwana. This message has been brought to you courtesy of the National Anti-Corruption Campaign Steering Committee.
The UN Convention says it is evil. The African Convention says it is evil. Our own laws, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Act, says it is evil. We condemn it in churches and mosques and temples on a daily basis, but we engage in it. What is the problem?
Well, thank you very much, Prof, for having me here. And I agree with you that there is no single Kenyan who does not know that corruption is evil. And that is why that many of those who engage in it will do it under the table, in dark spaces, and they would not want to come out into the open and claim that they have engaged in it. Yet we know every day that it is happening. We know it is being done by our parents, our brothers or sisters, our children, our grandparents, and we continue to sink deeper as a country in this problem. But I think for us to move forward, we have to acknowledge first and foremost that this is an important matter that the public ought to have a firm say on. And secondly, remember that the standards that a country espouses are the standards that the public sets. If our leaders or anybody in this society is engaged in corruption, it is because we have tolerated it. If we, as a member of the public, were to stand up and say no, and demand action where corruption has taken place, we would move this country in a positive direction.
Samuel, there is one thing that you and me know, having been practitioners in the fight against corruption, is that one of the major mandates of anti-corruption bodies is education.
That's right.
And this has been undertaken. Your own organization, Transparency International, is familiar with this. You do your surveys. Is there a single thing that you can identify as the magic bullet, which, if released, can make the public participate positively in the fight against corruption?
I don't think there's a silver bullet, but there are a combination of factors that, if we would put them in place, we would influence the fight positively. The Kenyan public looks a bit powerless now because corruption has taken place, and we have institutions that have the responsibility of holding people to account. But that has not permeated in our society. We have too many cases of corruption that go unpunished, too many cases where we are told who did not do what, but are never told who did what. So we have a lot of scandals that the list continues to grow without any solutions being found. If we were to chart a new path where people are being held to account, both administratively and also legally, judicially, so to speak, we would energize the public to come out more strongly. The reason the public has become muted on this matter is because there are a significant number of Kenyans who feel that they are helpless in light of the ineffectiveness of the institutions that are there to fight corruption.
I hear you, and the viewers and listeners hear you. In the minds of your typical Kenyan, corruption is Anglo-Leasing, is Goldenberg, is Triton. Yet in my view, corruption is as simple as giving a 5-shilling bribe to a police officer or the police officer taking it. Do you think that corruption has now become a national culture, that people don't even recognize it when it sits on their laps?
Prof, I think Kenyans recognize corruption, whether it is bribery, whether it is corruption that involves procurement malpractice, they recognize it. I think the only aspect of corruption that is still, according to studies, not very well understood and appreciated is the conflict of interest aspect. But the idea of influencing or abusing power or entrusted power for private gain is something that is appreciated and is understood in its manifestations by many Kenyans. I think the problem is that we, as I said, we've not charted a path where we hold people to account. And there are many Kenyans who would want not to participate in this corruption, bribery, which is the most prevalent, especially in service delivery, but have no support system. They feel they don't have a support system to be able to resist that kind of entreaties.
If today the President of the Republic of Kenya were to appoint you as his chief advisor in the fight against corruption, and his specific question, how do I get my Kenyan people to help me in the fight against corruption? What are the 3 things you would tell the President to do?
Well, one is to ask him to get our institutions to do their work. And having got an institution to do their work with all the necessary resources that are required to do it, I would ask him to lead the fight from the front. And this does not mean just pointing out at people who are engaged in corruption or are suspected of being engaged in corruption. I think there is a big benefit, a low-hanging fruit that we can pluck, and that is using the administrative processes that exist whenever these issues come up. And this doesn't mean that you take action against people by way of victimizing them. It is just by way of ensuring that there is confidence that is given to institutions that if an allegation has been made, before it is verified or not, it is proper for the holder of an office, of a position, to vacate that office, awaiting clearance as the law has provided. If that were to happen, and it is in keeping with the law, we would make some steps. Then I would say the second thing is to ensure that we have effective complaints handling mechanisms across the public sector. We should not leave the fight against corruption to the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission and the National Anti-Corruption Campaign Steering Committee. We should ensure that everybody is involved in the fight against corruption, because corruption takes place in all spaces that we have. If we create effective complaints handling mechanisms where Kenyans know if you report a corruption experience, that action is going to be taken, then we will be moving closer to making progress. The third one is just to encourage Kenyans to come forward and report corruption. I would say that I would ask the President to speak to the people of Kenya consistently and eloquently about them coming out and denouncing corruption whenever and wherever they encounter it, making reports to the necessary authorities, and also speaking to one another to desist from engaging in corruption, knowing very well that it has very deleterious effects on our society.
Yesterday, the day before yesterday, I was at the airport in Dar es Salaam, and a loader told me, "You are going to Nairobi." He thought I was Tanzanian. "Oh, your goods will be stolen." That defines the attitude of some people about Kenyans? Do you think that our tolerance for corruption is so high that we have lost the battle?
Prof, our tolerance for corruption is very high. And that is why when corruption issues come up, we more or less just window dress them and do not go to the root of the matter. And I say this with a lot of empirical data that you can look at of cases where corruption has taken place, but there is no conclusive action on that. Indeed, you will find a few cases that I can enumerate where people have been punished outside this country for engaging in corruption in Kenya, but have never been punished here. And there is even no investigations going on in this country. So I think we have not lost the fight. I think to give up would be to give up on this country. For corruption is from our perspective, is the biggest challenge that this country faces. It ties together all the challenges that we can face now. Even the very foremost of security is, in my view, at the base of it is corruption. So we cannot give up on it, and I cannot say that we have lost the fight. We cannot afford to lose the fight.
There is some lady somewhere in Taita Taveta who is listening to us, another one in Migori, in Nyanza, and Mukureine, and they are asking, these people in Nairobi sitting and telling us to fight corruption, what are the specific things that I should do when I go to a hospital in Nyeri, for example, or Taita Taveta and Migori, and do when I see a doctor prescribing medicine which I then buy in his pharmacy in town, complete with GOK mark?
Well, the fight against corruption has to be a very personal fight. And I think the people who suffer most from corruption are the kind that you've just described. People who every day are coming into public offices to seek for services, and who cannot afford those services outside the public space. And those people have the greatest stake in ensuring that the fight against corruption moves forward. What they can do is to make a complaint on those issues. One is institutions have processes through which you can complain. Secondly is to seek the help of entities or institutions that have been set up at the national level that have a mandate to fight corruption. The Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission is one of them, but there is also the Commission on Administrative Justice. And there are also other organizations that are non-governmental, such as ourselves, who will be able to take up whatever complaints or feedback we get and give them the gravitas that is required for action to be taken. So I would advise them not to keep quiet and feel desolate. They should take action and report. And let them not say that their small action will not make any difference. It will make a lot of difference if everybody who encounters malpractice in our public spaces reports. And I have seen in the last 1 year a few cases that I can also list where citizens have raised issues. In fact, two of them involved hospitals, public hospitals, and action has been taken because of the persistence of citizens in voicing their concerns about the way these two hospitals were being run.
Let's look at the question of ethnicity, which is a fact in this country. And I speak from some little experience about ethnicity, that there is a sense in which members of the public will protect their own simply because they are their own. And when they are confronted with prosecution, they'll come and gravitate in protection around them. What would be your advice to the Kenyan public as they fight corruption, taking into account what I've just said?
Well, ethnicity is a big challenge in this country, and I think the fight against corruption has suffered setbacks because of ethnicity. But it is important for the Kenyan public to realize that a thief is a thief, and a thief is to be dealt with in accordance with the law, and that thief could be your own brother, your own sister, it could be your own father. And therefore, if this country is to move forward, then as a country under the rule of law, because it is the rule of law that protects all of us and protects our interests. For if we were to cut down all the laws that are in place, we would have anarchy, and in times of need, we will not be able to be protected. So the state, the machinery that the state has to protect us is through the law. So we must let the law take its course, and we must remember that whether it is your brother or your sister who is engaging in corruption, the impact is both on you and others who are not even within that family setup. It is important that the Kenyan public take up the fight against corruption seriously and as a fight for the continued existence and integrity of this country.
We'll come back to what I call the Mwizi Wetu syndrome later in the program. But I want to talk about corruption in the political arena. There are those who now believe that in Africa and countries, many of them, including Kenya, the thing we call corruption is, rather election is not an election, it's an auction. And the highest bidder is then purportedly elected by the public. What would you advise the Kenyan electorate? Because the original sin is committed at the point of electioneering when you are bought to vote, and then once you've been bought, then the buyer recoups his investment. What would be advised to the Kenyan public?
Well, Prof, it has been said that people get the leadership they deserve. And I think if we are not careful and we elect leaders who have questionable records, we will bear the consequences. And I think that is something that is being apparent in our system. There is way too much money that is spent in bribing voters, and our institutions, including the public itself, find itself at a loss. I have spoken to members of parliament and recently members of the county assemblies on this issue. And they always tell me, show us the way, show us how it is possible to get the public not to ask us for money. And we will be happy not to give that money. In the election, in the last elections, we engaged in a very vigorous campaign to tell the members of the public that we have ordained for ourselves a constitution that has set certain standards of integrity for leadership. And that the first sieve is actually the ballot. If we go and cast a ballot for somebody who we know is a thief, Prof, the truth is, for many of our people who steal public funds, the people who vote for them actually know that they have stolen public funds. We will be helping such people perpetuate corruption to a level where, if we are not careful, then this country will get to a level where it will be captured by criminal elites who are just interested in the rent that comes out of auctioning this country.
We hear you, Samuel. The saying goes that in Africa we elect the big thieves into public office and hang the small ones. Let us now hear from the audience here, as representatives of members of the public, what do? We know it is a sin, we talk about and against it, but we participate in it. We have all sinned and fallen short of the glory of both God and this country. What do we do? Do I have anybody? Yes, please. Your name, of course.
Okay. My name is Moses Uriat from KCA University. From my opinion, I believe that in order to curb out corruption, as you have said, corruption is taking place under in most cases, corruption takes place underground, where the public doesn't see. So I believe that corruption can be rooted when those people who experience corruption come out and report the cases so that it can be carved out. So thank you.
Thank you very much for that intervention. Any other question, please?
My name is Eliud Choge from KCA as well. One thing I'd like to pose a comment and also a question to our guest today is that at the grassroots, you've said that one of the ways we can stamp out corruption is by increasing public participation. But I believe that most people, it's not that Kenyans, there are people who can't voice out that there's corruption. But those few who are willing to voice it out are actually, there's low incentive for them to do so. So that you find that the big fish outweigh the small ones who actually want to fight them. So I'd like to ask our director from Transparency International, what effort are they doing that is actually visible on the grassroots? And also what, from him, what is their biggest achievement thus far in the fight against corruption? Thank you.
Samuel, of course, that you will say is normally the wrong question. That what have they done? The right question is, what are you doing? But it's not me who is on the chair today.
Well, Prof, I do agree with you, but what I would say is that Transparency International Kenya is just like other civil society organizations that are working in this area, is a facilitator. Our work is to support the public. Our work is to energize the fight against corruption by educating the public and showing them where to report, and sometimes even holding their hands and taking them where they need to go so that their complaints can be heard. You would agree with me that it's a fairly small contribution, because the fight against corruption is a fight for me and you. It's a fight for the public. So we should desist from looking at it as a fight for Transparency International Kenya, or a fight for Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, or even our institution, or even the president himself. We should see it as a fight that we have to engage in, all of us.
Thank you very much, viewers. Today our visitor is Samuel Kimeu, the Director of Transparency International. And the question we are posing to you, viewers and listeners, what is your role in the fight against corruption? How can we allow our country to be infamous for being one of the most corrupt nations on earth? We must remember that corruption affects all of us. When we come back, we will ask Mr. Kimeu and members of the audience here, what are the practical things that we must now do, particularly in the context of devolution, which in the minds of some has devolved corruption. We will be with you in a short while.
He's my defender.
Get this song, Defender by Daddy Owen. Bonyeza *699 *7#. Remember to get this song and other best songs, Bonyeza *699 *7#.
Taking pride in constructing tomorrow's skylines. Adding strength to Kenya's landmarks. Presenting the power for specialized constructions. Cementing the nation's future. Simba Cement, the strength and pride of Kenya.
SMS KN to 31010 to download your favorite music. Remember, SMS KN to 31010. Terms and conditions apply.
Nataka machungwa.
Subiri tu kidogo analetwa.
Nachelewa.
Nini wewe? Machungwa yako wapi? Enda ukalete machungwa, customer anachelewa.
Madhe, kuna vile tumabega tunaniuma kiasi.
Shika hii kaluma yangu.
Kaluma Pain Balm ni dawa ya kusugua iliyotengenezwa kutoka kwa miche maalum ili kutuliza maumivu ya misuli. Kaluma Pain Balm. Maumivu ya kizidi, pata ushauri wa daktari.
We, kaluma yangu.
Mimi nataka ushirika na wewe. Ewe roho, mimi nataka ushirika na wewe.
Je, umechoka kuzongwa na mawazo? Je, unahisi kama maisha yanaanza kukulemea? Una shida zinazokukabidhi katika maisha yako, katika nyumba yako, katika familia ama kazi yako? Je, mambo hayakuendei vizuri kama ulivyotarajia? Unashindwa utapata usaidizi wako wapi? Mungu anajua na haja kusahau kamwe. Weke imani kwa Mwenyezi Mungu. Sasa unaweza kupata jumbe na nukuu za Biblia zitakazo kuwezesha kuimarisha imani yako kupitia simu yako ya mkononi. Tuma ujumbe mfupi wenye neno NC kwa nambari 31010. Kumbuka ni neno NC. Utume kama SMS kwa nambari 31010 ili upate kujijenga kimawazo, kujiboresha kwa imani na kujiwezesha kwa nguvu za maombi. Tuma neno NC kwa 31010 sasa. Pata nguvu za neno na imani za nafsi.
Game.
Je, umewahi jiuliza ikiwa hakungekuwa na ufisadi nchini, tungekuwa na manufaa gani? Hebu nikupe taswira kamili. Kila mwaka nchi yetu hupoteza karibu bilioni 400 kutokana na ufisadi. Je, waelewa bilioni 400 ni pesa ngapi? Inamaanisha 4, 0, 0 na nyingine na nyingine tena nyingine hadi jumla ya 11. Ikiwa pesa hizo zingetumika kujenga barabara, tungekuwa na uwezo wa kujenga barabara 14 za kiwango cha Thika Road kote nchini. Na kama zingetumika kujenga hospitali sawa na Mama Lucy Hospital, tungejenga hospitali 700, kumaanisha kila kaunti ingekuwa na hospitali 14. Na kama hizi pesa zingetumika kuwajengea nyumba wasiokuwa na makao, tungejenga nyumba za vyumba vya kulala 3 kuwapa makao familia 1200. Usalama ungeimarishwa kwa kuwaajiri askari kutokana na hizi pesa. Pesa hizi zaweza kununua unga wa sima pakiti bilioni 3.5 ambazo zina uwezo wa kuwalisha watu wote nchini kwa miezi 6. Tungeweza kununua ng'ombe milioni 3 wa maziwa na milioni 8 wa kuchinjwa kwa nyama, na kuku milioni 800 kumpa kila mtu kuku 20 nchini. Hebu fikiria, si ni ushenzi kuwa na ufahamu huu kisha kuendelea na ufisadi?
Kupigana na ufisadi, jukumu langu. Kupigana na ufisadi ni ungwana. Ujumbe huu umeletwa kwako kwa hisani ya The National Anti-Corruption Steering Committee ikishirikiana na Uungwana Institute.
Watazamaji na wasikilizaji, mmesikia athari za ufisadi. Hii leo tunaendelea na kipindi hiki ambacho lengo lake ni kuhamasisha umma dhidi ya vita dhidi ya ufisadi, na mgeni wetu hii leo ni Bwana Samuel Kimeu ambaye ni mkurugenzi wa taasisi ya kimataifa inayoshughulika na mambo ya uwajibikaji. Swali tunaloliangazia hii leo ni jukumu la mwananchi, yani wewe, katika vita dhidi ya ufisadi. Na Bwana Kimeu, umeona tangazo hilo. Athari za ufisadi ni athari ambazo zinaeleweka, zinajulikana. Na swali ambalo lazima tuliulize, je, katika bara hili la Afrika kuna mifano ya mataifa ambayo yalikuwa katika jangwa la ufisadi na imejinasua kutoka kwa minyororo hiyo na sasa wameshika mkondo sawa?
Naam, naweza kuzungumzia nchi kama mbili hivi ambazo zimekuwa mfano mwema kwa mambo ambayo yanaweza kufanyika kukiwa na uongozi ambao unazingatia vita dhidi ya ufisadi. La kwanza ni Rwanda ambayo iko karibu na sisi na ambayo ni mwanachama wa Jumuiya ya Mashariki. Na ukienda Rwanda utakuta kwamba watu wa Wanyarwanda wanakubali kwamba ufisadi ni jambo ambalo halikubaliki. Na hili ni jambo ambalo halikubaliki katika maafisi ya umma, ni jambo halikubaliki hata katika ngazi za juu za uongozi. Na ikiwa utajiingiza katika ufisadi katika hiyo nchi, utapata kwamba utashtakiwa na utaweza kuhukumiwa. Kwa hivyo hiyo ni nchi moja. Nchi nyingine naweza kuzungumzia ni Botswana, ambayo imekuwa ikifanya vizuri katika ule utafiti ambao tumefanya na mashirika mengine yamefanya. Nao wamefanya juhudi hii kupitia kwanza kuhamasisha wananchi, lakini pia kuweza kuona kwamba wale ambao wanajiingiza katika ufisadi wanachukuliwa hatua za kisheria. Kuna Mauritius pia ambayo nafikiri imepiga hatua kubwa katika miaka hivi karibuni kuona kwamba ufisadi umepungua, na ukiangalia katika zile standards of living utaona the development indicators ambazo Umoja wa Mataifa huu unatumia, utaona kwamba Mauritius ziko na zile za juu zaidi katika Afrika nzima. Kwa hivyo hizi ni nchi tatu ambazo zimepiga hatua na ambazo zinaweza kuwa mfano mwema kwetu kama Kenya.
Kwa hivyo kile ambacho nawaambia watazamaji na wasikilizaji ni kwamba inawezekana katika bara la Afrika. Naam, inawezekana. Je, hebu tuliangazie swala hili la ugatuzi. Sasa unavyojua kuna magavana na magavana hawa wakiwasili kokote wanaingia na mbwembwe na vingora ili mradi fedha zimeshuka. Lakini tayari kuna malalamiko. Kwa mtazamo wako, ni kitu kipi au vitu vipi wananchi wa gatuzi hizi wafanye kuhakikisha kwamba ufisadi haukiti mizizi katika gatuzi hizi 47?
Mwananchi ana jukumu la kina kabisa kuona kwamba ufisadi haujakita mizizi katika akaunti zetu. Na sheria, katiba ikiwepo na sheria ambazo tumebuni hivi majuzi kuweza kusapoti ule ugatuzi, zimetoa nafasi nzuri sana kwa mwenye nchi kuweza kuona kwamba ufisadi haujaenea katika counties. Jambo la kwanza ni juu ya mipangilio ya maendeleo, kwamba sheria imempa mwananchi nafasi ya kuweza kusikilizwa na kuweza kujadiliana na viongozi katika counties kuona kwamba yale ama zile priorities za maendeleo ambazo zinafuatiliwa, sauti yake imesikika. Kusema kwamba miradi ambayo ni ya viongozi haina nafasi katika hii Kenya yetu. Nafasi ile iliyoko ni masuala ambao wananchi wamesema ni muhimu kuweza kuinua maisha yao. Jambo la pili ni kwamba mipangilio kutambulika sasa ni kwamba lazima kuna ule mpangilio wa kuona kwamba hela zimetengwa, ile budgeting process, na huo ni mpangilio ambao pia mwananchi ako na jukumu la kina ambalo anahitaji ajihusishe nalo, na ni jambo ambalo nafikiria wananchi kadhaa ama kiwango kiasi ya wananchi wamejitokeza na kuweza kuona kwamba wameuliza maswali ambayo yanahitaji kuulizwa. Hivi majuzi tumeona katika kaunti zingine wananchi wanauliza maswali juu ya bajeti ya mwaka uliopita wakizungumzia juu ya bajeti ya mwaka huu. Ni jambo la kuridhisha kuona kwamba wananchi wanajitokeza. Lakini ukiangalia katika utafiti ambao tumefanya hivi majuzi, utakuta kwamba ni asilimia ni asilimia 17 peke yake ya wananchi ambao walijitokeza. Walisikia kwamba kuna mikutano ya kujadili juu ya bajeti na planning process na wakajitokeza. Wengine walisikia lakini hawakujitokeza. Utapata kwamba kuna idadi kubwa ambao hawakuweza kujitokeza. Nikimalizia, jambo lingine ambao wananchi wanapaswa wafanye ni kuona kwamba ile mipangilio ambayo imewekwa katika kaunti ya maendeleo na hela zikatengwa, kwamba hizo hela zimetumika kwa njia ambayo inafaa. Na kuna zana ambazo wananchi wanaweza kutumia kuweza kutekeleza mambo kama haya. Ya kwanza ni ile tunaita social audits, ambao wanaweza kuangalia kama yale mambo ambayo yamewekwa katika mikakati ya maendeleo yamefanyika kwa njia ambayo ilitiwa ama iliwekwa. Kama hiyo haitawezekana, wao wanaweza kutoa malalamishi yao kwa taasisi ambazo ni husika, aidha kwa county ama at the national level. Kwa hivyo utakuta kwamba kuna majukumu ya wao kuweza kushiriki katika mikakati ya kupanga mipango ya county na pia kuona kwamba hela zinatumika kwa njia ambayo inafaa.
Tunakuelewa vema. Hebu na sisi ambao tuko hapa, hasa katika vijana, kuna vijana wengi tu ambao wako vioni, na sasa inaibuka ya kwamba hata vioni kwenu, hata shahada zingine mnazozipokea kuna ufisadi humo. Je, nyinyi katika mdahalo huu wote mna mapendekezo gani kuhakikisha kwamba umma imehamasishwa katika vita dhidi ya ufisadi? Tunaomba mchango au maswali kule nyuma tafadhali.
My name is David Gatia from Kenya Methodist University. Naunga mkono PLO Lumwa kusema acha shahada zenye zinapatikana siku hizi wanafunzi wengi wanatumia njia baya kuzipata. Kuna wenyewe wanahongana. So sisi kama wanafunzi ama tungeomba hizi vyuo mingi, like we have a lot of the institutions that can be brought about to deal with the institutions, with the corruption. Tungewaomba pia wakuja wa involve the students so that they can deal with the corruption from the grassroots, from the level. Asanteni.
Asante sana. Nimekusikiza vema, lakini tatizo, wengine wanasema ya kwamba tatizo la Kenya, Wakenya kila kukicha wanaomba wafanyi. Nani atajibu swali lako? Tuache kuomba, tuanze kutenda. Kuna nani ambaye atachangia?
Hamjambo. Jina langu ni Job kutoka Transparency International, na pia nilikuwa mwanafunzi chuo kikuu cha Nairobi mwaka uliopita. Jambo ambalo amesema ni kuomba. Kwa mfano kuna kuomba serikali, na swali langu ni je, tutaomba mpaka lini? Basi kama vijana sisi wenyewe tunachangia katika mambo ya ufisadi, kwa sababu mara nyingi tunavunja sheria. Ukijipata umevunja sheria, inabidi njia ya mkato ambayo utajinasua nayo ni kupatia mlinda sheria, kama ni askari, kama ni mwalimu, ujakuja ujafanya mtihani. Basi unataka kuona mwalimu umpatie kitu kidogo akuwekea alama zako. Mbona usijifanye mwanafunzi mzuri, mwananchi mzuri? Uangalie, uzitazame, uchukulie kwa uangalifu sana na heshima kubwa sheria zote zilizowekwa. Ndivyo usije ukajipata ile maneno mnasema kwa sheng kona mbaya. Kama umezingatia sheria, tunaweza kuavoid ufisadi sana. Asante.
Thank you. Samuel, last year I was in Uganda at a function called the launch of the Black Monday. And what they do on a Black Monday, or the theme was that every Monday, every Ugandan was being called upon to dress in black. And they were urging churches and mosques that they should not even accept tithes from people who are known to participate in corruption. Do you think we should take that direction so that when I pay my tithe, my church will ask, but what is the source of this money?
Well, I think we should be inspired by that kind of thinking, because the philosophy behind that is to make sure that there is social sanctioning for behavior that is considered illicit. So we can be inspired by that kind of philosophy and come up with our own ways of shaming and sanctioning socially those who engage in corruption.
I hear you, Samuel, but the tragedy in Kenya in the recent past is that when you name people to shame them, they don't get ashamed. They become even bolder. What do we do with these people who are never ashamed?
Well, I think it's upon us as Kenyans to shame them, because they may not be ashamed. Their conscience may be seared to a level where they consider themselves above the law. But Kenyans themselves can shame them. And a lot of them find solace in positions of leadership. And fortunately, in many of those positions, they will have to come to Kenyans to ask for their votes. So if Kenyans were to determine that we are going to sanction socially these people, we would not even wait for the legal system or the institutions that are in place to move on them. We would actually move on them and ensure that they are shut out from the public spaces of this country.
Let's now come to the Transparency International, and even the National Anti-Corruption Campaign Steering Committee has established networks across the country. I know your own organization is present in different parts of the country, as is the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. What are the things that you are doing specifically to ensure that the masses are energized to participate in the fight against corruption?
One of the things that we are doing is really to create awareness. And we create awareness and educate members of the public, not just on corruption and how it manifests itself, but also on how they can play their role in addressing corruption. So we are educating members of the public in that regard. We are also working with the leadership at the counties and also at the national level to make sure that we put in place structures that support public participation. We are working with a number of counties to elaborate public participation laws at the county levels, and to create opportunities for members of the public to give their views and to be heard. We also mobilizing members of the public to come forward and give their input to the various processes that are taking place at the county level. And also important is that we are part of the integrated public complaints referral mechanism that brings together the National Anti-Corruption Campaign Steering Committee, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, the Commission on Administrative Justice, the National Commission on Human Rights, and the National Cohesion and Integration Commission. You will notice that all these are bodies that have as their common mandate the receiving and processing of public complaints of different issues, be they corruption, human rights violations, and so on and so forth. So we have come together to create a platform that will enable members of the public to launch complaints of whatever complaint that falls in the mandate of any of these bodies can be launched in any of these bodies' offices, so that we can share the infrastructure that exists and ensure that the resources that would be required to duplicate the offices of these national commissions in all the counties are used for other purposes, and that the resources that are available in these commissions are resources that are shared by these commissions to ensure members of the public can be heard, can launch their complaints, and the complaints will be heard as if they appeared before the commission that is concerned.
Samuel, I hear you. Know, there is a sense in which some Kenyan will say the only thing that we know to be corruption are the following. One, giving a bribe and receiving a bribe. Major corruption such as Anglo-Leasing, Goldenberg, Triton and all. Could you tell Kenyans who are listening and viewing what in the world today is deemed to constitute acts of corruption so that they know what it is they must report and fight against?
I think a good starting point would be to elaborate on the definition that Transparency International, as a worldwide movement, has adopted. And that is that corruption is the abuse of entrusted power for private gain. And it is important just to unpackage that. Entrusted power it means that you have been placed in a position of trust where people expect you to discharge a certain responsibility on their behalf. It could be in a public office, it could be in a social gathering, it could be a chama, as we know them today, it could be the village well committee, it could be the church committee, it could be a ministry or a department of government. But as long as there is...
It could be a teacher and a student.
Precisely. And it could be a farmer and an extension officer.
And it could be a teacher who takes a pencil from school to take to his child.
Precisely. So the range is quite big, but what is basic about it is that you have power that is entrusted to you for the public good, but you decide to use that power for your own private benefit or for the private benefit of someone else associated with you. So there's the element of the entrusted power, the abuse of it, and then the fact that the gain could be private. And here I want to say that it also includes public officials who who manipulate the procurement processes so that they can fundraise for their parties to win the next election. So that is also corruption. So there's a whole range of corruption that incidents or cases of corruption that you can enumerate. But there will be basically bribery, the most common of them. There is the conflict of interest, where you are again in a position of conflict, where your interests and the interest of the public conflict with your own.
But Samuel, how do you deal with that, particularly in a country where if I am employed in public service, my entire village believes that one of my primary duties is to employ the entire village?
Prof, we have to confront that, because I think it's the big elephant in the room, if I may use that phrase. I do know through my own interactions that there are many of us in public offices who do not believe that conflict of interest rules apply to them, because the socialization that we have been socialized into is that we occupy public offices for our own benefits and the benefits of those around us. It is something we have to confront. The first step, in my view, is to educate ourselves and members of the public on this, because I do realize that there are elements of it that are not very well understood. And in some cases, you will even find people who are genuinely shocked that you can be telling them that they cannot be sitting in a board and also be doing work for that board, either directly or through a proxy. So it is a question of educating ourselves and then to develop codes of conduct and ethics that we can observe in our conduct of public affairs, so that we know that once you have a position of trust, anything that conflicts, any personal issue that conflicts with the interest of the public needs to be declared, and in many cases you have to remove yourself from making a decision that benefits you in that case.
Thank you very much, viewers, fellow Kenyans. So the book we should be writing is not, it is our turn to eat, but it is our turn to serve. This evening we have been talking about the role of members of the public in the fight against corruption. Our visitor was Samuel Kimeu, the director of Transparency International, the Kenyan chapter, you members of the public, the duty is yours. It is a patriotic duty. Remember, corruption is not only a crime, it is a sin. And if you are corrupt, you will never see heaven. That is one of the things that you must remember. We'll be back again next week in our quest to ensure that corruption is fought and fought to the death. Samuel, thank you very much.
Thanks
and
a lot.
God bless you.
Thank you.
Mimi nataka ushirika na wewe, ewe roho, mimi nataka ushirika na wewe.
Je,